That's always good.
Yes.
I'll stay out of it. It gets too confusing. It's working this time.
All right, we'll call the City of Kewaunee Common Council meeting to order for May 13th, 2024. Let the record show all members are present, Brewster excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Item 3, approval of April 8th, 2024 Common Council minutes and April 16th, 2024 Council reorganization minutes.
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
Any further discussions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Public comment communications, 3-minute time limit per person. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to speak under public comment? Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to speak under public comment? With no one here, we will close public comment. Item 5, boards, commissions, committee and staff reports. Plan Commission, Finance Committee, Public Works Committee and staff reports. Anyone have any additions or corrections to any of those reports? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 6, Mayor's Report. Well, I had the privilege of doing a ribbon cutting ceremony on Friday for the E-Balance Massage and Wellness at 1304 First Street. Renee Miller and their team. They've got a very nice facility there. That's formerly it was a childcare, I believe, by the administration building. If you have an opportunity, stop in and say hi and welcome them to their new business location. I took a ride by Father Marquette Park. I see the new playground equipment has been installed. That looks fantastic as well. I'd also like to congratulate Tanner Bortolini on being drafted in the NFL to the Colts, and I wish him a successful NFL career as well. So that is all I have under Mayor's reports. 7, unfinished business. 7A, council interviews with Aldermanic District 4 candidates, consideration and selection of a replacement alderman.
Well, we can't because we got none. So, what we can do is just leave it open and then we get somebody in and we can bring them to council for, discussion and acceptance, whatever, because we don't have any. It's hard to interview nobody, so, maybe it's really easy. So if you want to just leave it open and then we can just wait for somebody. We can wait till somebody actually comes in or repost it or whatever, or extend the deadline.
So then at this time, there will be no action taken?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to item 7B, ratification of mayoral appointments to committees and boards. Jim Brewster to Board of Review, Russell Anderson to Lighthouse Preservation Committee and Tug Ludington Committee. Do we have a motion to approve to ratify those appointments?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion and a second. All any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 8, new business. 8A, request for modification of a headstone, including a statue for Denise Atkinson. Yeah, we don't have public comment at this time.
No, no, the name is wrong. She's correcting Deborah.
Oh, I couldn't hear it. I'm sorry. Deborah. I'm sorry. That's just what I was reading. Thank you for that.
Sometime back in 2006, Ms. Atkinson approached Public Works or the cemetery sexton or whoever was in charge of the cemetery about a modification of headstone requirements, which permitted only one such headstone at the head and not at the foot of the burial plot. All headstones aligned to simplify maintenance of the grounds. That's the typical standard. There's not a whole lot of detail in the cemetery requirements as relates to headstones other than that standard. There is a note included in the cemetery book, which was included in the packet, which basically says from Dan Sellner, Deborah statue from her garden can be used as a headstone with the date and then signed by the clerk who took the note down. No one knows actually what that approval was referring to. It doesn't include any documentation of what we actually approved back in 2006. In a March conversation with Mr. Jack Weiss, he's designing it. He gave the description of what the intention was going to be, that the statue is going to be placed on top of probably a base that's granite, 20 inches long, 18 inches deep, and 12 inches tall. Would have her name and the dates inscribed on the unit. The entire unit would still sit atop a precast concrete foundation, which is what they typically do. Also states the foundation must conform to city standard, which is not described in the document. There's no documentation in the city code either. So there's nothing telling us what is actually allowed. There are many variations of what they call a wash around the monument, but none of that's really included. The controversy is less about the statue than about what is conceived to be the statue. But at this point, we don't really know anything about what was approved, and we're not entirely sure what would be allowed. You also have an image in the packet of what the statue looks like. If Ms. Atkinson wants to come up and, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Sure. If you want to come up and speak to this, you can give some detailed information on the statue.
He's a garden statue. She stands about this tall. Okay. And she's called the Lady of the Roses. She's concrete. And 18 years ago, I bought my cemetery plot and I came in and asked Karen about my garden statue being put as my headstone, and she told me that of course I have to have it approved. So she said, I'll send someone over. Now I don't remember his name all those years ago, but he came over and he said, I see nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It's approved. I'll approve it. So I said to him, is there anything I have to do? And he said, no. He said, I'll take care of it. And now all of a sudden I'm trying to get stuff in order. And when I got for the base, for the statue, she called and told me that you did not approve it. We're having the base made. Well, I think it's Wise in Algoma. They said they called here and it was not approved, and she stopped. She said, I'm not going to do it until I get, hear more that it's approved. So I said, well,
you have to understand, when we get a call and we don't have any relationship to what's in the document in the cemetery record, we didn't know what that had been done. So we didn't know there had been approval of any kind in place until we caught this note. Karen Mahowski actually found it in the book, and we took a picture of it so we'd have it on the record for this meeting. And
she's a beautiful statue. I mean, there's nothing, wrong with her. She's just, I've had her for over 20 years, 25 years in my backyard.
Are you looking at just to have you're gonna pay for the
She-
statue and the
yes.
base, and you just want us to install it? Is that?
No. You won't have to do anything. They will come
Well,
and
you
take
just-
my statue.
Well, you want approval from us to put it in the cemetery?
Right, that it's okay,
essentially, placing it on top of the base, so it becomes the top of the headstone. It's like a version of a headstone, it just.
Well, yeah,
Statue on
she
top.
will sit on a base, however big you have there, and she'll sit on top. And then on the base is where my name will go. And the date, and that's it.
And again, I was speaking with the administrator, he's seeking more clarification from the city attorney just in regards to what the ordinance, whether it's monuments, the definition of a monument, the record of the approval 18 years ago that, you know, you were mentioning there, just to get further clarification to make sure that it conforms. So I think until we can get that from the city attorney, I don't know that we can really make that decision. Just because we have to follow whatever the ordinance is, and that's where we need that interpretation.
How long is this gonna take?
Uh,
I can have him expedite a response so that we can have it back.
next meeting,
for the next meeting.
next month. Yeah, so. And then if there's any further clarification or specification, we can certainly reach out to you. And either if it wouldn't be conforming, what would it take to get it to conform and that sort of thing.
Cause they said that they'll come and get the statue and I'll have that done as soon as the base is done. And then it'll be placed already, so,
Yeah, sure.
you know.
Mhm.
And then she can go ahead and take care of the writing and so forth, and that's about it, you know. All done with me?
Yeah, we'll try and get that clarification from the city
Okay.
attorney.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, 8B, adopt ordinance number 646-2024 to amend section 94-8 of the city of Kewaunee Municipal Code zoning map to rezone a certain parcel of land from P1 Park District to B3 Highway Business District, Ellis Street, Jed and Alley Panzier, DBA Waterfront Bar and Grill LLC applicants.
The applicants filed a rezoning application at suggestion of staff pursuant to the construction of a parking lot adjacent to their new banquet facility right over here. Property in question is the former location of the city's water tower, which currently is zoned P1 Park. Construction of a parking lot for commercial use requires business zoning. Applicants therefore requested approval to rezone from P1 to B3, which is what the banquet facilities zoning were. We're working with the applicant on finalizing the design of the parking area in compliance with chapter 94, and based on the current design, applicants will also need additional approval of a parking lot on the property, as well as council approval to modify to permit on-street parking access off of both Franklin Street and Ellis Street. However, for this purpose, all we're looking for is just a request to approve the change of the zoning for that parcel over to B3 zone. Planning Commission reviewed this last month and voted to recommend approval.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 8C, adopt ordinance number 647-2024, repealing and replacing Article 6 of Chapter 18 businesses as it relates to short-term rentals.
Attached is a proposed ordinance to modify the standards for short-term rentals in the city, including process deadlines, requirements, and eventually fees. Currently, this section addresses the tourist rooming houses in a way which is highly technical and dependent on city employees to be able to enforce both at the license application stage and subsequently, and includes provisions that the state should already be regulating at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Process currently does not include a fee for this application process, meaning the city administrative staff are providing the review and issuance process without any fees to apply to the cost. The ordinance mimics the same regulations adopted by the city of Algoma a few months ago, with minor tweaks for cross-referencing. Algoma adopted a fee for these applications and for renewals, which the common council be requested to consider next meeting. One change the Planning Commission recommended was making sure the licensure is consistent with the required annual license issued by the state. Currently, the municipal code is a license year starting on April 1st, ending March 31st, and the state's regulatory process starts in July and ends June 30th. So we're suggesting that our license should mimic what the state already does, just to make it cleaner. Otherwise, you could theoretically be in a process where somebody could have one of these licenses at the state level, get our license, have it go into effect in April, and then their license would expire in June. And then you'd have 9 months of unregulated, I don't know what. Plan Commission, as I mentioned, reviewed the current version and recommended adoption with the changes noted. That's all I have.
Does anyone have any questions regarding that?
This is pretty much the same ordinance I'll go my house, right? I mean,
Basically, yes.
basically.
Yes.
I would be looking for an,
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
Keith, what approximately was the fees? What did the Algoa's fees look like for that?
Well, their fees ended up at 100 for the initial and 50, I think, for the renewal. They started out at 1,500. So, and then they got hit, so they.
I think they were looking for more input at their next meeting.
Yeah. So, yeah, they ended up at about 100 for the initial application.
Thank you.
So I would be looking for a motion to adopt ordinance number 647, 2024 as recommended by the Plan Commission. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, do I need a roll? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 8D, adopt resolution number 2024-2043, acknowledging review of the 2023 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, CMAR, and directing the Public Works Superintendent to submit the report to the DNR.
Yeah, this is the annual process. Report is provided by the Kewaunee wastewater utility to the DNR in compliance with state statute and compliance with the utility's continued certification. Report is attached. Josh Jacobs, who is the wastewater operator in charge, prepared the report as part of his licensure requirements with financial inputs from the clerk treasurer. This is forwarded direct to Common Council as required by the Board of Utilities. Should note that the basic summary at the back of the page lists that we got all A's, 4.0. So that's just a recommendation to approve.
That really show the job well done down there. It's been, I believe, a perfect score for quite some time. So job well done down there. I'm just trying to get to the. We're just reviewing the report, right? So I don't have any. Okay.
Just
Oh no, I do have a resolution. We can't
adopt a resolution.
Can't get my thing to work here. Okay, well, I don't see, but I will entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2024-2043 for the CMAR report for Public Works. Is
I so move.
there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 8E, approved job description for deputy chief position and benefit structure for advertisement by police chief.
Yeah, the police department is seeking to hire a new supervisory position to assist the police chief with those duties during the second shift as well as third shift. Current structure of the department is police chief, 4 patrol officers, full-time and part-time officers, who are usually sheriff's deputies. Previously, the department included an assistant chief position, which was formerly held by the current police chief. However, this position is included in the collective bargaining agreement. That's been in the contract dating back decades. Position is not considered a supervisory role as per a 1997 arbitration decision issued by the state, which essentially means the position is nothing more than a senior patrol position with increased pay and no additional responsibilities. So it's called an assistant chief, but it's not supervisory in any way. The association is replacing this position with a sergeant position, which would include basically the same duties, but the position was subsequently voted down after the chief suggested the position should be assigned as a second shift position. The most likely candidate for this would have been somebody who didn't want to work second shift. As the police chief needs assistance of additional supervisory position, we elected to create this position. The title went around several different layers. We started at captain and then it was lieutenant of operations, and then we ended up at deputy chief. Because it sounded most like a supervisory position, which is what we're trying to create. We're essentially trying to create what amounts to an assistant chief, except it's can't be called assistant chief, so we call it deputy chief and make it another supervisory position. Primarily so we can help, she can have somebody else provide supervision, something other than first shift.
Training.
Yes, training, support, and supervision. The job description and benefit structure were attached to this. They will work similar hours to what other officers work under the CBA, just because it's easier to do it that way. But the pay scale is intended to be 10% above the top officer pay and in the collective bargaining agreement. Which we're proposing to use as a wage rate rather than a salary, just so that we can offer them something with the opportunity to work overtime and get paid for it. This position is offered as a necessary component. The assistant chief position was always intended to be supervisory, but because of inclusion in the CBA, the arbitration was, no, it's not. You can't have a supervisory position in a collective bargaining agreement, which we're finally getting around to fixing at this point by putting it outside and creating a position, another secondary supervisory position in the place. Personnel committee reviewed and approved the job description back in April, back when it was called lieutenant. The benefit structure was not reviewed at that meeting, though a basic outline was discussed. Police department is authorized to pick up the cost for this position, so there's no additional financial requirements. And staff recommends approval. If you have any questions, by the way, the police chief is there.
Did you want to say
Yeah,
something, Rob?
just something else that I would like to note is that after that arbitration agreement in 1997, the description was never rewritten. So the copy that exists right now has the date of 1997 all over it. And it also says that it is supervisory, which the arbitration agreement said it was not. I was not given a copy of the arbitration agreement until November 6th of 2022. Prior to that, I had been the assistant chief for 3 years, and the work that the assistant chief was doing had absolutely over the years morphed into a position that held many other duties. So had I had that information previously, I was doing a lot of things that apparently I shouldn't have been doing. But that's the purpose of the position, to help the chief. It also then gets that person ready to potentially take over as chief. At some point, you need to learn how to do the things. The chief also has to have somebody who has the knowledge and the information about the department in case something happens to the chief.
Or even short term, if they were needing to stand in for the chief in a particular situation, that person would be
Sure.
capable.
Can you hire someone from within and just advertise for a patrol officer?
We are looking to do it from internally with current members of the Kewaunee Police Department, but that is up to the Police and Fire.
Police and Fire Commission set that whole process,
I know they do the hiring, the firing, the discipline.
even the process.
They do the process also. Okay,
And they're meeting next Wednesday.
I mean, they obviously take the recommendations of the chief.
right.
into
I
account,
understand.
but
I was
that
on it,
would be
yeah.
done.
Right, okay.
Any further questions, Scott?
So back to the collective bargaining agreement then, is this position deputy chief outside of collective bargaining then?
Yes.
Yes, it's designed to be outside the CBA. We don't.
Even though the rate is kind of hinged on the results of collective bargaining.
Correct.
To a
It's-
certain extent, yes, it's based on 10% of CBA, 10% above top level CBA.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the assistant chief still, that position title still remains in the collective bargaining agreement. We can't just take that out. That would have to be bargained when they do when bargaining occurs. But there is nothing that says we have to fill that position, so we're essentially just leaving that be. And then moving forward and under management's rights, creating another position because I need some help, someone else needs to know how to do the things, and the union is not letting us fill it as a union position, or they don't want, so.
Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the job description and benefit structure for a new deputy chief for the police department and authorize the police and fire commission to engage the hiring process.
Sorry.
Russ? We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for your work on that, Robin. 8F, adopt 2024 Marina Fund budget.
Committee voted to recommend forwarding this for discussion and approval. The budget, the write-up includes a lot of the discussions about stuff that we're gonna have to address at some point a little more formally, such as personnel cost allocations. The committee did recognize that some of this is necessary, and we're gonna have to be a little bit more persistent in trying to do this, particularly as a lead into next year's budget, so we can have that lined up, so we know what we're looking for. In our discussion on this topic at committee, it was noted that we recognize that some of the allocations which we came into largely may not be accurate or reflect what actually needs to be, what the kinds of work that are being done at the level they're being done at on an hourly basis against these different funds. And so we're gonna have to look at moving them around, lowering some numbers, lowering percentages of some of the positions across these funds and increasing them in all other places. The trick is that if you do that in the middle of a budget year, then you have to reopen the budgets and consider possibly having to do budget amendments at some point to fill in gaps that you didn't start with. The current Marina proposal for 2024 basically transfers in the entirety of the fund balance. And after we cut some things, it basically reduces, it actually gets into black territory. It actually is in the black. After we imported the entirety of the fund balance. So if we hold to this, and if the revenues hold up and the expenses hold up, we might actually come out of the end of the year with some kind of fund balance left over. But right now, that's what the prospect is it's based on the idea that we're transferring in the entirety of the fund balance to get to balance.
I think just to be clear, it's going into the black to have a balanced budget, but it's because of the reserve funding, just so everybody's clear on that. It's not because the revenue exceeds the expenditures.
Right.
So, but that's the position that we're in, okay? And I think based on what you've looked at, I know finance, Alderman Blaha, staff have, put a lot of work, Augie, everybody looking at all the different angles that we have here. And there's certainly more work to be done. And I think there's some more ideas that could be proposed for the next year's budget. But what you have before you tonight is about as tight as you're gonna get with all the work that's been done. And staff is recommending one of the two proposed draft budgets, either the staff draft or Alderman Blaha's draft that's there before you. The recommendation from staff is the staff budget. But we're free to have a discussion and make a recommendation on either or.
I guess I would just like to say, Mr. Mayor, that the expenses that we have for HSC for 2023 actual are not correct.
The expenses for 2023 actual
Yes,
are not correct?
Not what was in the packet.
that was in the packet, it's not correct.
No, because that was after those numbers were given to him before
Yeah.
I did journal entries.
So obviously, we like to use a reflection on last year to come forward with the next year's budget. How would that impact your proposed budget or the staff's?
Well, the only thing that I thought of, you know, there is not too many places where you can cut here. The only place you can really cut, you know, I had some questions about how much time City Hall is putting in. I did question that. I also did question the amount of the money that we were charging to the Marina Fund, like health insurance for one thing, we tripled that. I had a question about that. I thought that was a little excessive, but like Heath said, those are things we're gonna have to address. I think next year, I don't really see, you know, Heath is absolutely correct that if we don't approve it with the staff recommendation, then we're gonna have some problems with the money that we've already allocated to offset costs, staff costs at City Hall. That's the problem. The other problem is now the Marina Fund is completely depleted. There is no money to fall back on. And the only other concern I had is if we approve this, I guess I would like to see some sort of spending, some sort of input on spending, so we just don't, okay, now we've got this amount of money, we're gonna spend this amount of money. You know, I think some of that needs to be looked at before the money gets spent. That's where I'm coming.
Agreed. I mean, yeah,
It's just, I don't wanna, you know, I don't wanna see us, okay, well, we've got $50,000 out here, so we're gonna go spend $50,000. Well, we're actually spending money that we don't have in revenue. The only reason the budget's, and I think the budget will still be in the black even with the $74,822. I think the budget would still be in the red, not the black. So by probably $2,500, $3,000. So there is no money to fall back on next year. If the marina is not in the black next year, it's gonna have to go on the general fund. At the present spending level that we're at, if we continue this present spending level that we're at right now,
Net revenue.
this year and revenue, it will have to go on the general fund next year.
So for just a note on that, as it had been previously, 20 years ago, roughly, for many years. Is the way it operated out of the general fund and
It operated out
subsidized.
of the general fund. I think when you were sat on the city council, just a little bit of history behind that, it was your recommendation that the city take the marina over instead of continually putting everything on the general fund, have the taxpayers do it. When we built up that fund originally, the intent of building up that fund was, we knew that there were gonna have to be dock replacement. We knew we were gonna have to have dredging years ago. The reason we did that was to build up that fund balance. So let's say the city had to borrow $1 million, you could generate you could get a revenue bond and pay off the revenue with the money you have, with the revenue that you're collecting. Well, now we can't get a revenue bond if we have, because there's no revenue to pay our bond off. So we'd have to get a general obligation bond. That's the only way we can keep the marina going right now. So I think, next year, we do have to take a look at serious look at some of these expenses, because I don't know where we would get $75,000 next year to keep the marina running. Unless we have a huge, influx of revenue this year. At the present spending, we will be $75,000 short next year if we continue in the present spending.
Just to clarify then, in the packet, the 2023 figures are incorrect, right? Is what I'm understanding,
The expense figures there.
the expense figures?
They're not incorrect. They're just not updated.
So can we have the minutes at least reflect that, please, that they're not updated? So,
The figures that are in your packet are not the correct figures.
right.
They are updated.
Just so
now.
that if we reflect back and we're looking at this, that somebody looking at it would
Yeah,
know.
you'll
that.
get the correct figures. I mean, Joanne can print it
Yeah.
out and you'll get the correct figures. But what you see here
Right.
is not, those
I just
figures
wanna-
are not correct.
Going forward, people look back on something.
Sure, yeah, because they'll look back and say, well, that's what
Oh,
was in
this
there.
is what it was. No, that's
Yeah,
not
no, it's
correct.
not what it was. No, it's not what it was.
Is there any further discussion, questions?
There's only one, oh, can I just, Scott, just one other thing. I know, Bruce Konjerski was here a couple months ago. He's talking about it. And I think I talked to Heath about it too, that there was no money in for the KD fishing tournament. And I spoke to Heath about that and I said, I thought that there should have been something put in there for the fishing tournaments because the marina always, now whether it's not to the level that we were donating before, but there certainly should be something in there, I think. And I see nothing on that line item.
Scott, you had something?
Yeah, I just, in reviewing the two options, it looks like primarily the difference in those budgets is in the areas of wages, health insurance, and a little bit in terms of software assistance. Yeah, and so in terms of, at this point, the other department budgets have been approved. So if we remove, essentially the cost of the cities, the city offices, administrative support to the marina. If we remove that from the marina budget, aren't we faced with having to push it all back on the
It
other
upsets the general
departments
fund.
then?
Yes, it would.
So we go back to the,
That's why he said we can't do it.
That's
I
why,
mean,
that's
that's
why
why
I
we're
said,
doing what we're doing now.
that's why I said here, it affects, if we don't do that, if we don't do a transfer in of that 74,000, then it affects, it's gonna affect the city hall budget.
okay,
They're
That's
gonna
why the
be-
recommendation would be for
Sure.
the staff draft. budget.
okay. All right.
And just so you know, we are working on, using, we have HayGov for doing online payments. And we are going to be working towards getting the utility onto that. So that, that would, it's $2,000 a year. So that would be spread out across the
Shared.
water and the sewer.
Shared.
Is there any way we can start doing DocuSign with the contracts that we send out?
I guess that's something to look into.
I mean, I haven't signed a contract for the last 5 or 6 years. Everything I do, my banking and everything is done by DocuSign. I don't.
Well, I know
I don't
HayGov,
do paper
HayGov
contracts.
also does do contracts online. We just haven't gone that route yet.
I don't know how you would collect it, nobody likes to put their credit card in on the internet, so,
No,
but,
I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
the last time we checked into it, there were roughly about $3,000 to get into that.
I'm just looking
Annual,
at.
Augie?
What's that?
Is that annually or that's a one-time get on
Every year.
annually? Ooh, yeah.
Is that through DocuSign or HayGov?
That's Hago.
Oh, it was, okay.
But that expense could be shared with the utility is what you're suggesting.
Well, not the contracts.
Oh, not the contracts. Well, I think that's something that we can look at on finance, we certainly, if we're getting more efficient. On how you can do your contracts, how you can collect money, doing the boat launches and signing up for a dock on your phone and all those. That makes sense, as long as it doesn't cost more than what we're manually doing it, so. Is there anything else?
Well, what about next year? We don't want to be in this situation again.
No, I think that's why finance would probably start looking at that. We're gonna be looking at budgets again earlier this year because we have to determine, hey, where are these cuts that we're proposing to make at the marina? Where's that gonna get supplemented in the general
My
fund?
question isn't what we're doing with finance, but how are we gonna attract people coming into the marina?
Marketing? Yeah, that's a whole nother,
That's a different topic, I know.
It's a whole nother-
but it will-
but you're right. I mean, we can't just keep cutting. We need to grow revenue.
Yeah. So go to these boating shows in Madison, Milwaukee, get people back into the city and join the marina by do a fish boil. Do different kinds of things and get people back behind us.
Right.
the condition of the docks are definitely hurting us. I mean. there's no
Well,
question.
there's no question.
Can't-
I don't
You can't say
dispute
that,
that.
you know, that's,
But there are things that we can control, as you're suggesting that, you know, we can do. You know, right now, we can't get new docks, which we're working on, we'll be talking about a little bit here, but there are things like you're saying, Russ, that yes, we can do for promotion.
Then I'm just bringing it up to, let's start planning.
Well, isn't this something appropriate for maybe a committee to do or something?
Yeah, see, we're just making it, yeah,
Well, you
yeah.
know, that's something.
right.
That's what I had said in the meeting. We need to get not just here, but outside sources to form a committee
Right.
that would start brainstorming on how we can do some kind of fundraising. I mean, this community is about as big a fundraising as you can get, so I know there's people out there that would be willing to do it. It's just a matter of getting those spearheading and get it going.
Get the right people.
So, yeah. to
my
get it-
hope was that we wouldn't have had to deplete that fund balance completely. And hopefully that there would have been, you know, 20, the way I'd proposed it was $19,000, I think, then there are $20,000 in real figures. If the marina was in the black this year, we could have applied that to the marina budget next year. That would have given us 2 years to, you know, all this year and all next year to at least look at something without putting it on the general fund. Or, yeah, but not putting it, you know, on the general fund. But that's not gonna happen now because we have to use the entire $74,000.
Further discussion? If not, I would entertain that we adopt the 2024 Marina.
Mayor,
I'm sorry,
can I just say one quick thing?
sure.
What did we wanna do with the KD fishing tournament? That line item has a 0 in it. I think the city has always contributed to the fishing tournament, so,
What do you propose?
well, there should be,
You've got about $4,000 of clearance. Revenue expenses on the budget.
What do we normally do, Augie?
I think it was 500 or 250, or it's either 250 or 500. Maybe it was 500 for each. I think it was the blue door tournament or
250 for each.
I thought it was
bronze
250 for
and-
each.
and the
was it Bruce 250?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do the 250 for the remaining KD, and then next year we'd be looking at the 500 again for the two.
That's, I mean, that, cause that one fishing tournament's over with already, so.
So then, would you like to make a motion to adopt the 2024 Marina Fund budget based on the staff recommended budget with the addition of $250 going to the KD tournament?
I'll make
Well,
that.
it'd be not the KT tournament.
I'm sorry,
It'd be the blue door tournament.
Blue Door tournament. So we have a motion,
That was a brown tournament.
we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Hold on. Yeah.
Okay, I got a motion and a second on the floor here, the conversation's up here, you guys. Motion and a second, does the council have any further discussion?
I just would like to know what we're contributing to now because.
$250 for the Blue Door tournament, correct?
Yes.
That is what the motion was, that's the motion and the second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Brown,
Yes.
Blaha,
Yes.
Brewster's absent, Anderson,
Yes.
Octodall,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Conley.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Bruce. Okay, 8G, adopt ordinance number 648 2024 to amend Article 2 of Chapter 38 of Municipal Code to adopt amendments recommended by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
Yeah, the DNR approached Tony Sinkula about making some changes to our current chapter 38, article 2. Changes are to a certain extent organizational and also to clarify some additions. For example, there are 2 new additions, 2 new definitions, one called community served, one called served, and they're related to how they're used in the ordinance. They left it open on the penalties, so I reinserted under section 38-34, I reinserted our existing penalties of $50 and $1,000. And then the other thing that they tend to do is that rather than calling it abandonment, they call it well filling and sealing, which is technically more correct. They adjusted some of those standards, they added a few or clarified some to make sure to improve the clarity of the ordinance and then increase the time frame for getting the report form completed and submitted to the city clerk and to the DNR. It used to be 10 days, now it's 30. So they give you a little more time on that end, and those are the basic changes. The Public Works Committee reviewed this last week and forwarded to council for full consideration. Staff recommends approval. Or adoption, you should say.
Any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 648-2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion
Mr.
carried.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the marina budget here, will we be at the next month's budget? Will we be putting the correct figures in the packet? For the expense figures?
For 2023.
For 2023. Will they be in the packet? Because if they are not in the packet, and anyone who looks online and brings that up, the figures will not be accurate.
So the minutes should reflect that as well as the corrected figures, right?
You asked me to put it in there. I
Thank
put
you.
it in there.
Okay.
But I mean.
Yes, it'll be in
the
there,
correct
corrected,
one.
yes. With the notation that the ones that were in this month's meeting,
Okay, great.
yes. All right, thanks for clarifying. Okay, 8H, request by staff to move a designated holiday from Tuesday, December 31st to Friday, July 5th.
As with last year, we selected holidays that fall on the days of the week that don't make much sense from an office closure perspective. And this year it's December 31st, which falls on a Tuesday. While the city designates New Year's Day as a holiday with office closure, it means the city staff would have to work on Monday and then come back Thursday and Friday. Whereas the day after July 4th is Friday, so our thought was rather than having 2 days off in the middle of a week, why don't we just create a 4-day weekend right after July and just move that day. Now, this is also beneficial for front office staff because this is right around the time that taxes are being collected and it's one more day for people to actually come in and pay taxes on a day that's not when the office is actually open.
Everybody else has the holiday and we don't.
Yeah, so it would be beneficial for us to simply just move the one holiday from a Tuesday to a Friday, just to. Because nobody would come in on Friday, July 5th. We're just not gonna get traffic. So we might as well designate that day and then move the other one when the people are actually gonna come in and do stuff like pay bills.
Okay, does that make sense? All right, then I would entertain a motion to move a designated holiday from Tuesday, December 31st to Friday, July 5th.
I suppose, is that for just this year? Each year it's changes, okay,
Yes,
just to be clear,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. 8I, review of ordinance number 632-2022, repealing and recreating chapter 2, section 2-31 regarding committees of jurisdiction.
Reviewing this ordinance, it's got some stuff that needs to be clarified. Because there are a couple of places where committees are referenced with specific duties and then there are not specific duties. It also doesn't include anything, the ordinance does not include anything on public property committee, which then was subsequently adopted, if you recall, by a sort of an agreement after the fact. First off, there's no reference to what are the duties of the chairperson. In fact, there's no reference anywhere in municipal code about duties of chairperson. So on some level, that would be sort of a good idea. Just so that when we have new chairpersons, and right now we're on our third different chairperson of public property in 3 years. It would be lovely if they knew what that meant. Just for future council members, so they know what they're supposed to be doing, so as Kathy can attest. It would be lovely to know what it is that they're actually supposed to be responsible for. The other piece is particularly with respect to public property. Some of the requirements that were put in that, in the thing that, Rich Taylor put together, the charter, he suggests that the chair is supposed to be appointed by and ratified by the common council. And that's actually runs counter to the ordinance, which says the chair is appointed by the mayor. The committee members are appointed by the mayor, confirmed by council, but the chair is not supposed to be. And the charter actually specifically goes against that. So we would like to clarify that and also add that public property actually duties into the ordinance so that it's actually incorporated as part of the municipal code. The third thing is to clarify that there's two sections where committees are supposed to handle items referred to them. One of them says specifically by the common council and the other one does not. So it's not clear exactly where the reference is supposed to come in, and therefore it makes it hard for staff to know what's the chain of command. Is it supposed to come from staff to committee to council, or should it go from staff to council, back down to committee and back to council? So those are the kinds of things that need to be clarified, especially if there are things that fall outside the normal bounds of business. Like, for example, cemetery headstones. We don't know who that's supposed to go to. It would have been helpful to know that before you show up here tonight. It's not clear to me who's technically got jurisdiction, or if anybody has jurisdiction. So those kinds of things should be clarified. And all we're looking for is just to say that, okay, it makes sense to come in and revise this ordinance as part of the municipal code and make these clarifications so that it's a little more clear. And then we can come back with discussions about what chairperson duties should be added to the code. So we can, if nothing else, clarify it for purposes of this, because otherwise, under most cases, like say the plan commission, some of that stuff is spelled out in state statute, so you don't need to go there. But in the case of local committees, it makes more sense to have that clarification in your code.
I think there's one other note that I had, Heath, was under the personnel. It says that there would be, I'm paraphrasing here, but an ad hoc member that would be put forward selected from the employees, and it would be an employee that would be a non-voting member. We never had an employee on the personnel committee in the past. I'm not sure why we would need that. Usually if we're in the personnel, depending on what the conversation is, we would have either the appropriate department head and then typically always the administrator. So I think we've got representation in regards to the needs of the staff, if you will.
When Steve was here, that's what it was referred to as, he worded it so that like whatever discussion you were having, that department head was there involved, but that's how he worded it, was that, you know.
Yeah, I don't think we need that language in the resolution or in the ordinance. The personnel committee has always, had the appropriate personnel regarding what the issue at hand is, so. So it sounds to me like, Heath, we will be changing some of the wording and bringing the resolution back to next month,
Yeah, we're gonna bring it back as
or whenever it's ready.
Bring it back as we can to clarify.
Ordinance.
Yeah, so, yeah, it'll be an ordinance, so we bring it back for consideration at a future date.
Okay, so there won't be any action on that. We'll wait for next month. 8J, consideration of proposed consulting contract with Wisconsin Capital Solutions. If you recall, we had them speak to us before in reigniting the pursuit of the grants and working with Cedar Corporation, so we're not being redundant, working together. Keith, did you have some more to add to that? Same contract as before?
So, same thing, same term, same cost. That's all there is to it.
Is that where the $24,000 in contractual services going to the marina?
That's what it's listed for.
Pardon me?
That's what it's coming from.
Correct, John. So does anyone have any questions concerning?
I do.
Okay, go
I have
ahead.
concerns regarding how they worked for us previously.
Okay.
I mean, they even admitted that they didn't really put forth any effort because they had office constraints and personnel problems, so. You know, we paid 6 months plus in our air, but still plus. And I didn't think they did anything for us. How many people do we need to go after grants? How many different entities do we need? That's my concern. I just didn't think, and I certainly didn't think we should have had to pay that. We should have been refunded, especially when they admitted that they didn't do anything for us.
My concern too is financially with the marina budget being so strapped. 24,000 would at least be a little bit.
So concerning that, I understand you weren't here when they were here at the last meeting. There was not, a failure on their part. There were some things that got lost. There was a turnover in some of the offices in Madison. Certainly, the follow-up both on our side and their side could have been better. There were personnel that were supposed to follow through with some things and it didn't happen. When it comes to just going for the grants, it's not just the grants. They're, lack of a better word, I mean, they're a lobbying firm, okay? It's the connections, it's the people they know and what they can do for us. And working through the grant writing of Cedar Corp, I guess, Brandon, if you want to elaborate a little bit on how you feel that they would contribute to the team that we're looking to put back in place.
Yeah, I think in their case, it would be more relationship based, that there are certain grants we want to pursue that they're, you know, they're with people down in Madison, that would be more, I guess, what we would cover, as far as, you know, researching grants or writing them and stuff like that. We do those sort of things, but if we're looking for somebody that, you know, has relationships and stuff like that, it sounds like that's kind of their bread and butter, what those guys do.
I mean, having worked with them in the past, and granted, that's one thing, and it doesn't mean that like, oh, we're gonna always get money every time we go to them and it's gonna all work out great. But with some of us, John, myself and others that worked with them for that $4.2 million grant for the seawall, they pushed hard on a lot of people down there. I mean, that money that we got for the city of Kewaunee through a collaboration of efforts, right? I'm not giving credit to any one company or individual, but watching them push through the process and everything, they know what they're doing. If the money is gonna be gotten, it's gonna be there. And otherwise, the $24,000 in the budget that we're looking at is a lot of money. But in the big picture, when we're looking at millions of dollars that we need, it's gonna be a combination of, we're gonna have to get some grants and we're gonna have to probably bond or get creative on whatever our match on the city side is gonna be.
What year did they help you with that?
That was
2014 and
14,
15, I
That's 10
believe.
years ago. I've worked with a lot of consultants. That was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. They were not prepared. We can make calls to Madison with our elected representatives.
We
I have
can.
no problems doing that. Yeah, I can't support those guys.
It's a slightly different situation this year as it was back then. They pushed hard in Madison, but that was not a grant, that was a budget ask. So they went from office to office to office to office to office to office to try and get votes. So that could be a line item in the budget. It's a little bit different this year. However, the contract does have a termination clause in this one.
Well, the contract's written pretty favorably for them.
It is, but there is a 30-day termination clause in the contract here. Either party can terminate the contract within 30 days notice. So we should know, you know, I would think we would know within a couple months or at least a month as to what's out there. The thing is, they're out there pounding the pavement.
Right.
You know, unless Cedar Corp, unless you guys can be out there in Madison.
That's what I wanted
It's
to
just-
know is, do you think there's monies available? Are there grants available? What do you see I guess, the temperature of the waters at this point?
As far as marina funding goes, what we found has been more geared towards like transient slips. So we had just found out the last month that we were not successful with the big application, which was geared towards transient slips. From talking to the DNR, they basically, we submit it to the DNR, they pass it on to the federal level. The DNR was actually disappointed we didn't get funded on that. They thought that it was a favorable application, so we're gonna resubmit that one, but then there is the recreational boating facilities grant. That's also for transient slips. And then there's the Clean Vessel Act for septic and pump out stations, so really those are kind of the main three grants that we really see. I mean, if they have relationships that they can leverage to help get those funds, I mean, fantastic, you know, depending on what the funding line or the funding sources are. You know, we have relationships with people, our grant team, I should say, does with certain people. But as far as, yeah, you know, lobbying and stuff in Madison, I mean, that's not stuff that we do on a regular basis,
No.
I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
Or have those relationships, you know, at the political level, I guess. Ours is more with, you know, staff from the DNR, rural development, CDBG or different things like that, that we, you know, work with on grants on a regular basis. But as far as, you know, ties with at the political level, that's not really something.
I guess what I was wondering is how much in the way of monies is out there? Is there a lot of money out there at this time? Is that a big thing? I think, you know.
Not
Is it?
not a ton, it's competitive. The stuff
Right.
for marinas and docks is really competitive, and again, it's for transient slips, and as a whole, there's a lot of money for marinas, but most of it's geared towards industrial, commercial harbor type stuff. Which the feedback that we've gotten from like the DOT looking at the harbor assistance program grant or like the recreational boating facilities grant and stuff, is there isn't a lot for recreational stuff. It's more geared towards heavy industrial, commercial type facilities is kind of what it looks like.
Originally, we went after that grant that was supposed to be a harbor assistance grant originally.
Yeah.
But the governor didn't put anything in the budget for the harbor assistance program, so that's why we had to go through the budget process.
And it's kind of interesting because I mean, even you look at like the tug bollard replacement program or project, that's replaced through the harbor assistance program grant. But in the DOT's eyes, with the conversations we've had with them, they're saying that the marina is purely recreational. You know, they're saying that bollard replacement, that's for staging commercial ships and stuff like
They
that.
put money in the budget every year for marina repairs and things like that in the harbor assistance
Yeah.
program. Every year.
Yeah.
There was, I think it was like $15 million, I think they put in there.
It's a pretty significant chunk of money every year that goes into that program. Yeah. And a lot
Is that something that you think we can get into? Or is that something that Wisconsin Capital Solutions can get us into?
I can't speak for them, I guess, but from communications we've had with the DOT from kicking the tires on the HAP grant, they basically said the marina's not eligible because it's recreational. It's not a commercial harbor. Is what we've gotten from the DOT.
Keith, what's your opinion? You and I went down to Madison with them. We met with the deputy secretary of transportation and went through that process with them in the last cycle. What's your opinion?
The problem when we went on that trip was that the deputy secretary then left the department about 2 weeks later. So I felt like we wasted our time. It would have been lovely if we'd known that in advance. Because then we wouldn't have scheduled a meeting with them if we'd known he was gonna be leaving, because it was a waste of time having him in the room. He was our biggest advocate in the room and he was up 2 weeks later. So I felt like on some level we wasted a trip. Because I would have rather talked to somebody who was actually gonna be there. The reason why we got the HAP grant in the first place for the bollards is because those bollards are considered commercial. Correct. That's the only reason we got that grant. Because they anticipate those bollards being used for something other than for tying up the tug. If they're outbinding the pavement for stuff that's off schedule finances, and they can do a great job at that, that's lovely. We're not aiming for that because we don't think we're gonna get it. I think as I recall, you said at the last finance committee meeting, I'm referring to Mr. Anderson, that Joel hadn't even heard from him. Is that correct?
I asked Joe Kitchens, he hadn't heard of them. As far as talking to political leaders.
That's because they were not the same name.
They were Arrowhead at that time.
Yeah, they changed names.
Well,
I find that hard to believe.
we can talk to
Yeah.
Kitchens and the Jocks. We don't need them to talk to them. we've got elected representatives at the state level. You tell them they've got staff that will help us out. If there are grants out there to be had, and all I'm hearing right now is it's commercial, has to be related to a commercial venture to get a grant. And I haven't even heard of a grant that could be applied for our marina.
It didn't help any, after the last meeting, they gave us a reference to a grant that, okay, have Cedar Corp check it out, and they checked it out and we're not eligible. So I don't want them creating extra work for us. Okay. These guys came up with a pretty comprehensive table of possible eligible grants. And if they're gonna help us squeeze the flesh on some of our applications with people, that's great, but these people also want to hear from us. They don't want to hear from our lobbyists, they want to hear from us. When we have a grant application, one of the first things they want us to do, and they're the ones recommending this. They tell us, you gotta get a meeting with them so that they can attach a name and a face to consideration of an application. So what they're telling us is, ultimately, we have to be the ones to perform. I don't know a lobbyist is gonna do us any good on grant applications. Because it's entirely about your performance on the grant application and your ability to fulfill your end of the grant part of the application process.
They said all they would do is point out grants, they aren't gonna write them.
Yeah.
Cedar Corp writes the grants, you guys know what we're eligible for.
Well, I'm not exactly hearing any support for it, so I guess at this point, we don't have to take any action on it.
I think we should talk to Cedar Corps one more time, though. I mean Cedar Corps,
Wisconsin Capital
Wisconsin
Solutions.
Capital, yeah.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't hurt to talk to them and see, if something comes up, we can certainly put it off until the next meeting. But, I don't know.
well, I guess between Heath and myself, we can reach out to them
And do what? If
I know.
all of us that really want it. Ooh, I mean, I'm okay to vote now. I don't need to hear from them again.
well, I mean, we don't have to vote, we can just let it, go ahead, Brandon.
Maybe just a suggestion, I mean, if they see something, an angle that they can play or a potential way to get something, in the state budget or whatever, maybe the appropriate time would be for them to come to the city with a contract at that point. Not necessarily just upfront, hey, pay us and we'll see what we find. Maybe if they have a strong indication or feeling or have a conversation with somebody down in Madison that says, hey, maybe this is a fit. Maybe that would be more of an appropriate time, I guess. So just throwing that out there.
Like I said, right now, I'm not hearing any favorability, so there's
Fuzzy.
no, so. All right, then we will move on. 8K financial reports, month ending March 2024. Any additions, corrections, questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Brown,
Yes.
Blaha.
Yep.
Brewster is absent. Anderson,
Yes.
Occidental,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Conley.
Yes.
Motion carried. Announcements, item 9, are there any announcements? So Janita's not here, so I guess really. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Nelson, second Blaha, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.
For the 16th.
Yeah, we're on to
This month.
60 this month, it's next month.
About that.
Yes, I'll get a hold of Brewster and see if that'll work.
All right.
Okay, now you're gonna.
Who's coming in tonight?
Oh,
Brewster's coming in tonight. She's flying back into town.
Okay.